Right, so yesterday finally brought that ceasefire to Gaza. The ceasefire arrangement between Israel and Gaza, Israel and Hamas, came into effect officially. And though we'll believe Israel will stop its atrocities there when we see them actually leave, if they leave, the events in Lebanon don't inspire trust after all. But following this, and following the scenes in London, where peaceful protesters were arrested in their dozens by the Met Police, not least the organiser of the Peace March, not least MPs like John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn being brought in under caution to be questioned about their vicious actions of laying flowers in memory of dead Gazan children, and despite one ill-advised statement being issued in the last week already by Keir Starmer, celebrating the announcement of the ceasefire as that one was, he went ahead and issued another one, celebrating it coming into effect. And if anything, this one was even worse, even more disgraceful, even more biased and one-sided than the other one he wrote. And the condemnation has come hard and fast. Right, so Keir Starmer has issued yet another, he shouldn't have done it, statement in regards to the ceasefire that has now come into effect between Israel and Gaza, cheering the release of hostages in what many hope will be an end to the genocide, but which is really only going to be a pause in hostilities. The rhetoric from Benjamin Netanyahu, the deal he has supposedly cooked up with Donald Trump, means that whilst the big orange man baby Trump can crow about bringing peace to Gaza as he becomes president again today, the reality is he's given Netanyahu the nod to go back to war once he's milked this ceasefire sufficiently for his own ends. Here's Starmer's latest statement. Keep an eye on your blood pressure, please. The release of 3 hostages today is wonderful and long overdue news after months of agony for them and their families. Among them is British citizen Emily Damari, who will now be reunited with her family, including her mother Amanda, who has never stopped her tireless fight to bring her daughter home. I wish them all the very best as they begin the road to recovery after the intolerable trauma they have experienced. We stand ready to assist and support. However, today also represents another day of suffering for those who haven't made it home yet. So whilst this ceasefire deal should be welcomed, we must not forget about those who remain in captivity under Hamas. We must now see the remaining phases of the ceasefire deal implemented in full and on schedule, including the release of those remaining hostages and a surge in humanitarian aid into Gaza. The UK stands ready to do everything it can to support a permanent and peaceful solution. It's another one of those take a deep breath moments before you say something bannable. So for one, where is your welcome for the release of Palestinians? Or do you truly believe that all of them are justifiable wrong-uns held in Israeli captivity, many of them for an indeterminate amount of time and without charge, making them de facto Israeli captives, and there are so very many more of them held in Israeli detention than Hamas hold in Gaza? What of the relief for their families? What are the tireless efforts their people will have been making to get their people freed? Do you support them? Do you stand ready to help them? Or are they just Hamas, all of them, and not worthy of even a mention? Well, you didn't give them a mention, so clearly they aren't worthy, are they? Why are Palestinian captives not worth the gushing sentiment those held by Hamas were, Keith? That is borne out by the fact that for these 3 Israeli captives, Israel released 90 Palestinians. That's the gulf in numbers, that's the difference. Israel held 30 times more people if you assume this to be an equal trade. And of course they kept seizing people throughout the last 15 months since the night of October 7th, 2023. Hamas haven't done that, have they? But let's talk about these 3 captives along with all the others awaiting release along the time frame set out in the agreement. Starmer talks of their agony and trauma, and certainly being taken from their families will be traumatic and agonising. No one is going to argue that point. But not half as much, perhaps, as the last 15 months of indiscriminate strikes by Israel affecting these same people, not knowing if they were going to end up being killed by their own side, as over 100 of the hostages taken on October 7th have been. How many of them incidentally have died thanks to intelligence flights being flown by the RAF from RAF Akrotiri on Cyprus as well? And also why, now the ceasefire is in place, are these intelligence flights still happening? As another flight took off yesterday following the ceasefire coming into effect. Didn't it, Keith? Video footage of the 3 released young women have shown all to have been in good health, all things considered. Even the IDF have commented that they were in good health when the Red Cross, who acted as the go-between in the transfer, handed them over to Israel. Hamas even sent them back with little gift bags. And this is all entirely in keeping with the commentary given by other hostages who have been released since, in that they were treated well by their Hamas captors. Contrast that with the reports of the Palestinian hostages, for that is what they were. They were not prisoners or detainees or whatever else the media or Israel chooses to call them. Never hostages, though, because that would equalise them, and God forbid the apartheid attitude of Israel towards these people not be carried by mainstream Western media, and their politicians after all. Incidentally, most of the prisoners released by Israel came from Offer prison in Ramallah in the West Bank, not from Gaza at all, where Hamas are not based. Such is Israel's widespread and systematic abuse of the people whose land they occupy. One of those who was released, a 24-year-old woman, was detained for the crime of having made a social media post criticising Israel for the destruction of Gaza. Truth is a crime, it seems. Here's an excerpt from a Guardian article which touched on the Palestinian side of this release. Another prisoner released was Ahmad Shah, 18, who was arrested in January 2024 in Jenin, the West Bank. They arrested me because my brother died during a shootout in Jenin. After he died, they arrested me. They raided our cells on Saturday before releasing us and threw tear gas at us. They tortured us in the cell every day. They also tortured and mistreated the women. Osama Shadeh, who was waiting to be reunited with his 17-year-old daughter Asil, said it's hard to describe the emotion we're feeling at this moment. My daughter was arrested on the 7th of November 2024 when she was protesting against the killing of Palestinian children in Gaza. She was waving a Palestinian flag. Israeli soldiers shot her in the foot and handcuffed her. They accused her of trying to stab the soldiers. The fact that she is being released now means that Israel knew that my daughter had done nothing wrong, yet they kept a minor in jail for over a year. No wonder Starmer doesn't want to talk about the other side of the hostage release equation, is it? Hamas, by all accounts, treated their hostages well. Israel, conversely, are regarded as brutal torturers and abusers by their captives. But for as much as I can lay into Starmer's statements, so can many other people. For a guy with 1.8 million Twitter followers, only 1,000 people had retweeted his statement after some 15 hours at time of writing. And of course, of those 1,000, many of them were indeed quote tweets, and people have really let him have it. Green Party Deputy Leader Zach Polanski wrote, "Absolutely devoid of humanity. They cannot be out of office soon enough. It's vital we continue to grow the alternative so we don't end up with something even worse." Words of warning about the rise of Reform UK Limited, that Starmer's authoritarianism is perversely ushering in through the door. Middle East journalist Richard Medhurst wrote, "The Zionist stooge Sir Keir Starmer is happy about 3 Israeli colonisers being released, with no mention of the thousands of Palestinians held in Israeli dungeons. This makes sense as he worked very hard to murder the latter." An Accountability Archive founder, Philip Proudfoot, wrote, "A surge of humanitarian aid? What are you saying here? That previous levels of humanitarian aid were not sufficient? Why? Was Israel blocking that aid? Is there a war crime? You're a human rights lawyer, no? Are you suggesting that aid is predicated on political settlements?" Well, indeed. That and many other issues, though, notably most of all the lack of any mention of the Palestinian captives, is what commentators have picked up on most of all. And again, it has to be said that for all of those comments, I could not find one with anything positive to say to Keir Starmer, or anything positive to say about his statement. He appalls everybody on a great many things, but none more so than his ongoing absolute support for Israel no matter what. Bought and paid for by the lobby, serving their interests and not those of the people of this country, and certainly not the interests of the people of Palestine, occupied as they are, the people of Gaza who have endured a genocide for 15 months. But then, how can we be surprised at that when he won't even call a genocide, and has apparently been seeking to redefine the word behind the scenes to get himself out of the human rights and international law violating hole he's clearly dug himself into. My contempt for him is absolute, as is his devotion to Israel. Starmer's regime cannot come to an end fast enough. For more on the public rinsing Starmer got the other day for a very poorly worded, ill-advised and unwelcome statement on Gaza, as aforementioned, check out my coverage of that in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, to ensure you don't miss out on new daily content and help support the channel, which is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid, therefore. Cheers, folks.